Welcome to another episode of Things I Learned in my PhD So You Don't Have to Do One, a series where I talk to PhDs and soon-to-bes about the things they learned during their graduate degree that either transform them or traumatize them. Either way, you won't have to do one. My guest today is Dr. Chandni Kumar. Chandni graduated from Ludwig Maximilian University Munich in the field of biochemistry in 2023. And a fun fact about Chandni, she has her own podcast called Daily Dose of Honest Science, where she interviews microbes and bacteria. It's got a lot of culture. Chandni, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much. I never had an introduction of my podcast in such a way, but okay, I will keep
It's
that in
accurate,
mind.
right? It's accurate.
Kinda, of course. Yeah, I talk to bacteria how they feel like in culture. Yeah.
Honestly, it's important. It's important, right?
Yes.
They do
Yeah.
determine how happy we feel. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
before we tap into your wisdom, Chandni, can you tell me a little bit more about your PhD? What was it about? What was your experience? Yeah.
Mm. So I was still working in the field of human centromere. So for the audience, if they want to imagine what that is, you all know that your cells have to divide, right? And this has to be very accurate, otherwise we will end up maybe in the cancerous state, which we don't want to. So that the cells can actually divide is heavily relying on the so-called centromere, where a specialized part of the chromosomes are defined in such a way that in the end the microtubules can bind to it, and then you say segregate the sister chromatids, right, to one mother cell and the daughter cell. And this whole orchestrated way how to do it is still like very fascinating and still not really known what's happening there. So there's a lot of known, but still it's kind of a mystery how everything assembles. And I had the opportunity to work on this. And finally I'm wrapping up a bit of my work now. And it's a new protein that I characterized with my colleague together that has a profound impact on how this whole thing assembles, and might also have an impact on later for cancer treatments and so on. So it's
Wow.
kind of interesting.
So it kind of sounds to me like, if cell division is a process and it's got, effectively like I just assembled that piece of IKEA furniture yesterday, so I'm thinking like IKEA instructions. And so it's
Yeah.
like you've got all the steps.
Yes.
And it sounds like what you're saying is that there's a step, not all the steps are known, but there's a protein that you've characterized that's a part of this IKEA step process
Yes,
that
yeah.
kind of like helps us understand how it all comes together.
Yes,
Or
yeah.
really comes apart.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that's basically something that is not known yet. So I hope that I can publish it soon, and that people understand why this might be very important, because that could be a really important piece to understand why this whole centromere is evolving, or at least that we understand how the composition is actually done. So that's kind of the way I can go into it, so that people
Fascinating.
understand. Yeah.
I think
It's a lot of work.
something that's so fascinating to me is that our kind of like scientific understanding of these processes, like you said, is still, we have a general idea of how it happens, but we have the very, very specifics of it are not yet quite fully understood.
Yeah.
And yet our body has such an innate knowledge of how to do all these things. It's like,
Yeah,
if you could
yeah.
only talk to your cell, you could be like,
Yes.
hey, what are you doing right now, man?
Exactly. Just talking to yourself, be like, why are you doing this? Why is this protein now doing that? Why? Like that. That is kind of the interesting part. And as a biochemist and molecular biologist, um, you have so many techniques that you can use to answer these questions. But of course, you always have a love-hate relationship with these proteins, right? So.
I don't think I've ever I'm certainly not a very STEM focused kind of PhD, so I don't think I've ever had like a favorite protein, let alone a protein that I hate. But I can certainly imagine that it's
Yeah,
interesting once
it's
you get to know it.
you sometimes talk to the Western blot and be like, why the F are you not working? I want to visualize you. Like so this kind of love-hate relationship, or you try to get the protein actually in your tube, so you recombinantly express this. And 1 year of my PhD was just wasted because I tried out so many different techniques to get the protein. And then later on, there was another paper published where they had a much easier way to do it. And you were like, okay, great. I had 1 year wasted of my life to get this done in the very old way. Um, and now there's another way how to do it. And of course, I checked if it's possible, and suddenly it was possible for me, so I could continue.
Yeah.
But yeah, many lessons learned.
Honestly, though, that feels to me more like maybe 1 year of learning. It's not
Yeah.
wasted. It's 1 year of
Yeah.
learning. And also, if you imagine, if you had started your PhD a year earlier, you would have had to wait that much longer for the paper to get published.
Completely, yeah.
So honestly, pretty good to still have to finishing.
And yeah, so also in that case, you have to imagine I had my PhD exactly the time where Corona was. So
yeah.
that was already like, if you suddenly get an email from your university, you're not allowed anymore to come to the lab. You have to wait till we get you the permission. Then suddenly you start to talk in a small WhatsApp group with your colleagues who can enter when. So that was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And of course, everything delayed later on because you couldn't do the experiments like you wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And that was also a huge learning for me, that we are sometimes very privileged. And when these kind of catastrophes happen, you never know in what kind of situation you will be later on, right? So
Yeah.
appreciate that you are not, yeah.
I remember, speaking of COVID and doing your PhD, I finished my PhD right at the end. Sorry, right at the beginning of COVID. So I
Okay.
graduated in August 2020, but then back in
Yes.
March. Back in
Yeah.
March, I remember sitting in my lab, and I was talking to my wife, and we were just talking about like, oh, well, how long do you think this thing's gonna last? Because we had to grab all of our stuff from the lab, like the plans and everything. We didn't want to like, just leave there for however long. I was like, you know what? This can't last any more than a couple months, a couple months. And then just, oh my goodness, like I've never been more wrong about something, just years. But
Yeah.
yeah, I imagine doing it and you having to go in and do the work during that period of time was
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah. So that was really difficult.
But of course, I think that also lends itself to having a very unique experience with your PhD. And so I kind of want to now tap into what is the thing that you learned during your PhD so that others don't have to do one or don't have to suffer through another catastrophe like you mentioned
Yeah.
to learn it.
So maybe a bit of context before we go to the actual lesson. The problem that I had, and I think many people hear about this, especially people who are in the doing their PhD or want to do a PhD, but maybe not so people who are not so into it. The problem of guidance and the problem of supervision in academia, especially, is let's say in a very nice way, not optimal. And the problem is that in my case, you read these horror stories, and it was exactly a horror story. So going through that was already painful. And in my case, my supervisor just, he was also not really that a big guy in the institute. So everyone was kind of happy that he left.
Wow.
And the problem was that I could stay there because he left for another country. And he gave an F about me. So I was really completely alone in the lab. I had all the postdocs were gone, all the colleagues who already defended, were gone. And even the technician had to leave at some point because the contract could not be prolonged anymore because there was no money left. And it got in such a case so worse that I was actually on the money of someone else's. So from another group, actually.
Yeah.
So they were funding me a bit so I can finish my stuff. And this lack of guidance and how to really do your research and critically think was kind of missing.
Yeah.
But I learned that on my own way. So I was critically assessing my stuff much more than maybe someone else would do.
Yeah.
But I think that's the most lesson learned, what that you are capable of doing or getting the experience that you need is really important for yourself, for your self-development.
Right.
And yeah, sometimes you need someone who guides you, but maybe it's even better if you have someone who guides you, is you actually, so the person
Right.
yourself.
So that's kind of independence. Did
Yeah.
you have an idea when you started your PhD that
hmm
it would be like that? Because it sounds like people started leaving.
Um, there were red flags that I
Okay.
ignored.
Tell me the red flags.
The red flags were other group members told me don't take the PhD.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. And I was like, okay, maybe it has to do because I was raised not to, so in English it's a bit difficult to say, but you are very polite in German. You don't call the boss by his first name, so you
Okay.
always call him by his surname, right? And that was completely not the case in that group. So they called him all the time with his normal name. And that was for me like, okay, maybe that's the problem, why they're in that case.
Oh, okay.
But in the end, it was not that of course, it's bullshit what I thought. Um, and the second time the red flag came up was when other group leaders or group members of other labs told me that he already lost 2 or 3 PhD students within several months because they just, canceled their PhD because they couldn't deal with him. So
Wow.
that was already a red flag. And the problem that I had back then is I applied for several other positions, but I never got an answer back. Funny enough, right now I'm working with someone where I applied for, and he was feeling very sorry back then. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, and yeah, I don't know why, but maybe it was meant to be that I have this kind of experience. I have no idea.
Right.
Um, I could have made it maybe a bit easier for me if I would have left earlier. But the problem that I have is I'm also a kind of loyal person.
Okay.
So I didn't want to ditch my doctor father in that sense.
Is
Um,
that an actual term, Doctor Father?
I guess, yeah. Or,
Whoa, that's kind of it's I know
or
I've never heard
yeah,
it before, man.
supervisor. So your
Yeah,
supervisor in German, it's called Dr. Vater. So, um, and he,
it's kind of
yeah,
creepy.
I don't know. It didn't felt right for me to do that.
Yeah.
So, and I also had the problem that maybe I'm not able to finish on that project, so I have to start over again. And I didn't want to lose the 3.5 years that I had already again to do 3.5 years to then
Oh,
get my PhD.
yes. Yes.
I'm not, and back then I was really like, I want to be a group leader. I want to become, someone who is leading in the field. And now I'm in the postdoc and I'm thinking, okay, is this really what you want? So, um,
So a little bit
yeah,
disillusioned with academia, which is
yes,
honestly not entirely uncommon. Like I do hear
no,
that.
no, yeah,
But going back to what you had said before, your lesson of
yeah,
developing the skills to be independent, and sometimes
yeah.
you kind of have to look inwards to that to be that person.
Yeah.
How did that come about? Like how at what point in your red flag filled PhD did you kind of look at it and be like, there's kind of two paths here. I can quit or I can persist, and then if I do persist, what has to happen?
Yeah. So it was, I think, in starting of my second year when he was talking to me that he might leave soon.
Hmm.
And we had this discussion that I should maybe go with him. And there was another year, nothing happening because of Corona. So I was like, okay, maybe I can finish.
Yeah.
But that kind of, this one year was already for me like determining, should I stay? Should I leave? If I stay, what will be the consequences? And the consequences were not that obvious in the beginning because that we don't have money from the grant that he got back then was not very obvious. So
Okay.
he was lying to us. He was
That's
not
shady.
very transparent.
Yeah.
And in the end, to figure out that there's not even enough money to actually get me finished was already like the biggest red flag that you can have. And um, early on, I think it was half a year or a year where I started to finish, there was um, this switch in my head that I have to do everything now on my own. Because
Wow.
he was not very supportive in any way. When I was presenting data to him, he was not interested. Um, he didn't really give me any ideas. Um, and he was not critically assessing also the stuff that I'm doing. So basically just letting me be and not really
Yeah.
getting stuff together that we can, have maybe a publication together or something. Nothing.
Yeah.
And it got worse to such an extent that when I decided to write up my thesis and I sent it to him several times and be like, hey, correct it.
Yeah.
He never did it. Later on, when I submitted, then he started to correct some stuff. He wanted to change the title. He wanted to change this. Very, stuff that doesn't matter actually.
Yeah.
And it got so worse that the last time we met, he shouted at me. He was really angry. And he told me, like, bluntly in my face, I'm gonna write up that you have to write your thesis again.
Wow.
And you think this kind of person has a lot of power, right? Because he's in that position and he is the one giving you the title in the end.
Yeah.
So that's why I got such a big anxiety that my body just, collapsed. It was in actually on the day of Christmas where I get
Oh
into
my
the
gosh.
hospital because I got such a bad infection that it was going upwards to the kidneys, and then so I was really really sick. Um, and then finally in the beginning of 2023 I got the offer that I can defend, and then I needed to organize the defense date.
Wow.
And he did not, you know, he did not respond. And then when he was filling out all the time slots that other had time, he actually said he doesn't have time. And when I found a date where everyone has time, he had, yeah, he had the guts not to come. Like
Wow.
7 in the morning comes an email in, hey, I'm not coming because I'm sick.
Dude, wow.
And
Unreal.
it's not like he's hours away. It's rather short because it's a country that's next to us.
Wow.
Um, so you can imagine. And still, I was so dumb and was loyal to him. And but the people, the professors there, they were so pissed that they were like, "Hey, we just, we finished this now. You're done. You get your
Yeah.
degree, and that's okay."
I mean, it's good that you had people to actually, that
Yeah.
were maybe of a level mind and
Mm,
actually recognize the
yeah.
work that you were doing. And Johnny, I'm gonna go back on what you said. Like, I don't think you're a dumb person at all. I really, really don't. But am curious then,
Yeah.
because you do seem like a smart person, and I respect, having a sense of loyalty. But what originally drew you to this person or to doing this kind of PhD to begin with?
I was interested in the topics that they were doing research on, and I saw like my colleague was working on the human side of the centromere, and when I was reading up the field, I realized, wow, it's a really tough field, and if you manage to get the things really correctly, and if you can advance the knowledge, you have something to work on in the cancer field, right? So many
Right.
cancers do have problems with that. And maybe you can get something out that is super important to have a next treatment for, or
Yeah.
which protein to inhibit, and then you don't have these kind of problems. And I do have to say, I was also really close to my colleague because he was really, really nice. So big shout outs to Götz. Um, and he was one of the guys who taught me much. He was like a postdoc actually, but
Yeah.
he was doing his PhD, and his story is also a bit tragically because he stayed there for 7 years.
Wow.
He kept him for very, very long.
Oh my goodness. So I want to kind of touch on that. You talked
Yeah.
about hey, remind me his name again. How do you say it?
Guts.
Guts?
Yes.
It kind of sounds like guts, which is kind of like I think
No.
fitting.
G, and then you have Ö. So
The dots?
yes, yeah. Guts. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So going back to, obviously you had some people who were integral in helping you. And I think one of the things that strikes me is standing out in your lesson is that, if you don't have anyone to help you develop those skills, you kind of have to turn to yourself and become independent. But then being independent, obviously recognizing that you don't have those skills, right? Like you were going to learn them from somebody else, and now you kind of don't have anyone to help guide you.
yeah.
How do you then go from that point of, well, I'm gonna have to do this myself? Like, what's the next step? Do you like look for other people? Do you start reading about it? Do you like how do you recognize what's the next thing to do?
Mm, in that case, it's more like intuitive feeling. I don't know why,
Okay.
but it's something intuitive that is in my gut.
Yeah. What did your
So
gut tell you?
my gut told me that I need to talk to people about my situation
Okay.
and get some guidance. How can I get through it without making too big a fuss about it? Like sometimes it doesn't help if the whole administration knows what's going on because they get fed up with you. So what I wanted to do is, hey, first of all, I just want to have my PhD. I want to have the title. I want to go on. It was obvious and very clear to me I will not get a first author paper in this lab. It's just how it was because I was working on a revision for 1.5 years for them, and it got only on bioarchive. So he never resubmitted it, even
Wow.
so bad it was. So, and I still have the old lab books, which no one should know. Um, and when you go through the lab books, you see how much I worked. It's just insane. Um, so I realized early on that no matter what, I can do many things on my own, but to do them on your own, you need to talk to someone who has much more experience. And there, the technician comes in place from another group. So two of them who really helped me a lot and had a lot of experience. And one postdoc that was in my group still. And she also helped me a lot because I learned like how to do many things on my own. She just gave me the recipes, explained it to me, and I could go right away. So the lesson learned here is once you feel like you are stuck, you should talk to other people where you have the feeling they have a lot of experience and they could give you the best advice so you can continue on your own. It's not that you start following a certain person and be like, this person is gonna do everything for you. Rather, you want to have there's this saying, you help someone else so they can help themselves. I'm not
Teach a man
sure.
to fish sort of thing, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that kind of type, and I try to stick to this as well with my students right now. So I tell them how to do the things, and I can explain it one or twice times again. But then you need to be on your own feet and be like, hey, I can do it now on my own. So that's my philosophy, that you should do that on your own, and and the self-confidence comes with it.
I think one of the things that I'm drawing from what you're saying is that, on one hand, it seems like you went into your PhD being like, okay, this person's going to give me the structure, the scaffold. They're going to be like, hey, here's what you're going to do first. Here's what you're going to do next. And ideally, I think a lot of people have that where they're like, okay, I'll do the work, but I'd like to someone to tell me where to go.
Yeah.
And it seems like when you got to the point where you had to be very, independent, that you yourself had to identify, I know what I don't know. Like I know what the next step is that I need someone's help with, and then I can identify who knows that.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's incredibly valuable. Like going back a little bit to the IKEA furniture example, right? Like no one's giving you the instruction manual, and so you look at the parts you have, and you're kind of like, okay, I at least know what I want to build. It's not like, oh, this could be a chair or this could be
Yes.
a
Yeah.
ceiling lamp, right? Like
Yes.
you know what it is going to be. You're just like, who's going to help give me that next step of what
Yeah.
happens
Yeah.
next?
Yeah.
Um,
And
yeah.
maybe you ask your neighbor who did 2 or 3 times the IKEA already,
Yeah,
that,
exactly.
and then you get a new connection that maybe
Yeah.
can thrive to a friendship. All these kind of things that I learned, and I'm still very close with these people. So
Yeah.
once in a while, I come at the institute and be like, "Hey guys, how are you doing?" So it's that close.
Yeah.
And I'm still in contact also with my old people. So
Yeah.
very close with Götz. Because right now I'm at the point where I can publish his stuff. You have to
Yeah.
imagine he worked on his part maybe 4 to 5 years, and they just remain in the shelf.
Oh.
Like,
Yeah.
and this is something. And now, when you read up the papers that are coming out now, and you're like, ah, see, he already saw that
Yeah.
5 years ago in his data,
Yeah.
all these kind of things. And you're like, why? Why? You
But I
know?
think one thing you're touching on that I really like too is that
Mhm.
if there's another lesson here, right? Like
Mm.
an offshoot, the connections that you're making in terms of being independent, like you sought those out, you
Mhm.
really looked for those, and those are the things that are kind of contributing to your success now. Like the postdoc you have
Mhm.
is from someone you reached out to initially, many before you even
Yes.
started.
Yes.
And the techniques you know and some of the paper and the data you have is from these people that you reached out to and that,
Mhm.
you're working on their data and helping them out. And so
Yeah.
it really does seem like, aside from just being able to learn the skills, the connections you gain from
Mhm.
being independent and being
Yeah.
having that initiative or
Yeah.
really can help to build these, connections.
Completely. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So Johnny, the final question then being someone who doesn't want to have to go through what sounds like a terrible PhD, uh, how do they take what you learn? How do they incorporate it into their daily life? What would you suggest?
Someone who is very introverted like me, try to reach out at least once in a week to a stranger, maybe. Also, of course, not the stranger that holds a knife in their hands, but
Do you get a lot of those?
no, no, it's
Not
just
anymore.
um,
We moved into
um,
those.
no. But I think even if it's online, if it's someone that you admire or find really cool, at least on social media you can write a nice comment. Maybe you get in touch with these people, or if it's in real life, if you find someone from, I don't know, a colleague who's working in a different department in the company, that you just, say, hey, do you want to have a coffee? I would like to learn a bit more about your stuff, what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that itself can create really cool friendships, but also insights into other um, fields that you didn't have before. And therefore, you're actually expanding your horizon, which makes you already the top 1% that everyone wants to be. But I think
Yeah.
that's the main lesson that I learned, that I reach out to people and, be genuinely happy for them if they achieved something. That
Yeah.
is also something that I think is rare. One of my colleagues who left from another group told me that she really likes to interact with me because she has the feeling that every every word that I'm giving to the people, the appreciation, the happiness,
Yeah.
it comes from the heart.
So authentic. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, okay.
Stop.
I'm just genuinely happy
Yeah.
about if someone achieves what they were working for.
Yeah.
And it's not like that I want something from that. It's just I'm giving you something because you did
Yeah.
so great.
Yeah. And
That's
on a personal note, Chani, like I think that's how we got connected, right? It was I
yes.
was making these videos and you reached out, and I think
Yeah.
you still maintain a bigger social media presence than I do, and so I appreciate you being on this podcast, especially since more or less I've stolen this idea from you.
No,
So
I'm not that big, so I wish I would be that big, but I think I don't want to become big. I have no idea. I don't know. It's too much pressure on me then.
honestly, I think we're both at a point where it's like we can figure it out. It's we'll figure out what the next step is. We'll reach out to the right
Yes.
people, and then
Yes.
we'll do it from
True.
there.
We just asked Matthew, and then
Oh yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Shout out to Matt.
He's the Yeah, he's the biggest one, I guess, from all of us.
I suppose so.
I think so, yeah.
He's pretty tall too, so there's that.
Really? I
Yeah,
didn't realize.
I think he's at least 6 feet tall. Anyway, he can confirm in the comments. But
Okay.
I think that's a fantastic segue into saying, Charlie, thank you for your time today. Please, if you're
Thank you.
watching, take some time to check out Daily Dose of Honest Science. I think Charlie does a fantastic job just talking to researchers that she has much more expertise talking to than I do. So you can
Medical
follow
professionals.
and medical professionals as well. That's
Yeah.
correct. You can follow her at Kumar DDHS Lab on Instagram or at DDHS_podcast on YouTube. Chani, thank you so much for your time
Thank you so
today.
much, Joa.
I really appreciate it.
I don't know what to say. I just had to say you're doing an amazing job. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I really hope this little series really helps a lot of people. You're doing a great job. And
My mom will watch it, I think.
no, I think it's important to have these kind of lessons
Yeah.
put together and not having a 1.5 hour podcast. It's more condensed, not like me rambling around with some other people. But yeah, thank you very much. And also shouting out my little podcast ambitious
problem, no
project.
We'll interact with each other much more on social media.
Yes, we should.
Awesome. Thanks, Johnny.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.